We are very excited and grateful to have Salih Tony Kent with us today. Salih is a longtime student and friend of Sufi master Sidi Mohamed al-Jamal. For years, when Sidi traveled to the United States to teach, Salih would accompany him, often reading from Sidi's books during teachings. Being blessed to have such close proximity to Sidi for so many years allowed Salih to deepen his understanding of the timeless Sufi teachings, and he imparts this understanding with the humility and gentleness that opens the door for countless people to experience the depth of love, peace, and mercy that is the well of Sufism. We are very happy to have him with us today. His topic today is personal stories and insights from my time traveling with Sidi. Salih, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Welcome, and I'm honored to be with you all. I've missed my connection with all the beloveds that I used to have as we traveled around. I hope that the stories that I choose to share with you today will have some kind of personal meaning to you, that they will be indicative of something that you could have gone through as easily as me, because Sidi had this gift of kind of connecting with everybody in a very special way. What I'd like to do, because this last week I've done it, I've spent some time just going inside and really kind of feeling Sidi and reliving my experiences with him. There might be some new people that never met Sidi, but you can use your imagination. But those of you who do know him and did have the great opportunity to spend even a moment with him, what I'd like you to do is just to close your eyes and go inside and kind of relive the most poignant experience that you had with Sidi, your own personal connection, the thing that has kept you and brought you into the Tariqa, that, you know, opened your heart to his teachings. Sidi was definitely the fullest experience of divinity that I personally ever experienced in the human body. And just as Allah created the world as a manifestation of the endless possibilities of his own limitless and divine being, I think that Sidi manifested for us the endless possibilities of our own divine potential and the own divinity, the divinity that lives within each and every one of us. And sitting with Sidi and listening to him and just being in his presence, I think allowed all of us to have a deeper and more realized feeling of what it is like to be connected to Allah and to feel the love of Allah coming through, because Sidi just had so much love pouring out of his heart and so much love of Allah that he shared with us. It was extraordinarily unique. So what I was thinking to do today was to take you back to like my own personal voyage with Sidi, you know, how I met him and how it all kind of came to be. Some of you might have heard these stories, but hopefully you'll still find some value and some connection and some understanding from what I have to share. So I was going through a really superbly difficult time in my life. I was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I was going through a separation and divorce from the mother of my 4 children, and I was in a lot of pain about it. And one day I was walking down a corridor in my house, and it was a really big house, and there was a phone in the back of the house, which was just for the kids. And I don't think that in all the time, a year or 2 years that I had that phone there, I'd ever actually answered it, because it was a number for the kids. And one day I was walking down there, and just for some reason I picked up the phone, and it was a girl called Adriana Laskin, who was calling my daughter Jessica, who babysat for her and who rode some horses for her husband. And, you know, she asked me how I was doing, and I said, you know, I was not doing too well. I was, really depressed and everything. And so she suggested that I call a friend of hers called Nura Lokes. And as I've thought back over the years, I thought, my gosh, if I hadn't answered that phone, would I have ever been led to Sidi? I think maybe in some way I probably would, because I think it was part of my destiny. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because it was such a small thing. It wasn't like, like a huge thing that I did to all of a sudden have a door open to who Sidi was and how I could get to him. But she said, Nura's a counselor, and I think that she could really help you. And I said, well, I've been doing some therapy and it hasn't really helped. And I think my challenges are more in a spiritual nature even than an emotional one. And she said, well, Nura's a spiritual teacher, and I think you should call her. So I did. And Nura and her husband Tarek had been to Jerusalem and had met Sidi, and they were the ones that actually introduced me to Sidi. After a few visits with Nura, she said, I think that your situation is, you really need some help, some stronger help than I might be able to give you. And I think that you should call Sidi and make a connection with him. And I didn't right away, but I went to New York on a photo shoot. I was taking pictures at the time. And just one day I had so much pain in my heart and my stomach. And I was just I was desperate. And so I dialed the number in Jerusalem. Sidi picked up the phone and I said, hello, Sidi, my name's Tony Kent. Nura Lokes told me to give you a call. And he said, yes, beloved, I've been waiting for your call. And I heard him say that to so many people when they'd come into Sidi. He's like, yes, beloved, I've been waiting for you. And I believe he was. But we had a conversation and I told him what was going on. And he said, well, beloved, I think you should come to Jerusalem. And I said, well, I'm single parenting 4 kids. I can't really get away. I don't think I can get. He says, trust Allah and find a way, but you should definitely come here. And so I started looking for a way. And then actually a friend showed up and with 2 kids, and she needed a place to stay. And I said, listen, why don't you stay in the house? I'd like to go over to Jerusalem for a couple of weeks, and you can take care of my kids and stay in the house. And it was a great solution for her and a great one for me. So I called back Sidi and I said, Sidi, I found somebody that can come and stay with me, stay with my kids so I can come over. So what do I do? And he said, well, you're going to take a plane to Tel Aviv, and then you're going to get in one of the Jewish taxi cabs, and you're going to have the taxi cab take you to the old city in Jerusalem, and then get out of the taxi and get in a Arab taxi and say, take me to Sidi's house. And it actually it was just such an amazing story, because I'd been studying with a Sufi teacher from Morocco. At one time, this teacher, he needed some help for something, and he actually got in a plane and came to Paris and got in a taxi at Paris at Orly Airport and said, take me to Tony's house. Because that's in Tangier, that's what you do. You'd say, take me to somebody's house if everybody knew who everybody was. And the guy said, well, do you have an address? He said, no, I don't. He said, but he's an American photographer with frizzy hair. The taxi driver had happened to come by my studio to pick up the models. And he thought, I think I know who that guy might be. And so he brought him to my house. So when Sidi said, take a taxi and then say, take me to Sidi's house, it was like an interior connection that really, it opened my being to something that was, I thought, pretty unusual. So anyway, I did that. I got in, and I got into taxi, and then I got to Jerusalem. I got out of the one taxi and I got in an Arab taxi. I said, take me to Sidi's house. And the guy said, who's Sidi? So I said, well, I don't know. I never met him. All I know is he teaches at the mosque. Oh, I think I might know who he is, he said. So he takes me down to Sidi. He was in a different place than he is now. And he drops me at the top of the hill. He says, walk down that street. And his house is about halfway down. It was about 12 o'clock at night. So I took my bag and I I was not in a good station. I was very depressed. I hadn't slept. I was not doing well, and I started walking down the street, and then it was late at night. I didn't want to call his name or anything, and then all of a sudden I saw this door open, and I saw this person standing in shadow, and I said, "Sidi," and he said, "Nam, come." So I went with him, and he took me downstairs to. He lived above, and the Zawiya at that time was downstairs. And Miriam, an Englishwoman, was caring for the Zawiya for him. And so he brought me down there, and that was the first night that I got to spend with Sidi. And he did a majlis with Miriam, and he told me to ask questions. And he gave answers that were just, they were not anything I'd ever experienced anybody doing before. I'd been to some tarot readers and done some tarot reading and things myself, but the way these questions were answered and with the depth with which they were answered, it's like he knew things there was no way for him to know, because he didn't really, I don't think Nura had told him much, and they were just things that she didn't even know that he was telling me. And so I ended up actually taking the promise with Sidi that night and getting the name Salih. And at one point, at that time, Sidi used to always be on the floor, because he said the Prophet Mohamed was always on the floor. And he would lie down on the floor, and then he would put his hand like this, and he would rest his hand, and then sometimes he would just kind of drift off. And so after we'd done all this, and it was really late, and I was kind of in a dazed thing, I was kind of looking at Sidi, and I thought, wow, I've just had all this personal interaction, but I'm thinking if, I was wondering, will I even be able to recognize him in the morning? Because it seemed like his face just kept transforming into all the, one time it would be a dark face with a light beard, then a light face with a dark beard. And I was very disoriented to begin with, and very insecure and unsure of myself. And so I had a lot of fear, and I was feeling, wow, how am I going to remember everything he's telling me? How am I going to, what's this all going to bring? And so even though I was feeling his power, I was also face to face with my own fears a lot. And I think if some of you think back, there are probably moments where you would think for a week about a question that you were going to bring to Sidi, and then when you got in front of Sidi, something would happen and you would seize up a little bit. A lot of people told me about this. So lots of times we would just ask beloveds, tell us a question before you go in so we can bring it up in case you forget when you get inside. But he did have this overwhelming presence that contained everything and made you sometimes feel, I think, your own shortcoming or your own inadequacy in front of his power. At least that's what I felt. And so anyway, after that, the meeting that night, he took me into a room and he says, "You're going to be sleeping here." And there was a bed on the floor, and then there was a shelf, and piled on the shelf were lots and lots and lots of papers. And he said, "These are all my teachings that have been transcribed. And I want you to read as many of them as you can when you're here, because I don't allow any of them out of the Zawiya." So after he left me to go to bed, I started looking at these papers, and I saw all these titles. Who are you? The Secret of the Love of God, and the 7 stations of the soul, the 7 stations of the secret, the stations of love. And every teaching just looked like so phenomenal to me. And I said, my gosh, one, I'm never going to be able to copy all these, because he told me I was supposed to write all the teachings. And I said, what am I going to do? So incessantly for the 2 weeks that I was there that time, I kept asking Sidi, Sidi, please let me copy some of these teachings and bring them back to America so that the people there can start to see them and start to learn from them. And he says, no, there's no permission for that. Anything you can write, that's fine, but no, you can't copy any of the teachings. And I kept hounding him and hounding him and hounding him. And finally, the day before I was supposed to leave in the evening, I asked him one last, I said, Sidi, please, I didn't even get through 20% of these, and they're just so valuable, and I'd like to keep writing them myself. Please, please let me take them back. And he says, okay, beloved, you can, if you copy some of them tomorrow, you can bring some of them back. So I got up like super early, and I went out to look for a copy machine. And the thing is that a lot of these were on typewritten pages, but some of them had been stapled together, and the pages were like longer than a regular typewritten pages. Most of them were like extra long pages. And I looked for like 2.5, 3 hours, and I couldn't find a copy machine that had the paper that could do all these. And it was starting to get time for me to go back to the house when I finally found a copy machine that had some large paper, and I started madly copying all these pictures. So anyway, that's how I originally got some of the teachings back to the US. And so much I'd gone through so much in that time that I was in Jerusalem with Sidi, because he put me into a lot of retreats, and every day he would come and see me and talk to me and ask me questions and answer questions, and especially, questions about the teachings. And so I started calling him from the United States just to keep the connection. And I kept saying, Sidi, these teachings are so phenomenal, and I've shared them with a few people, and everybody would like to meet you. Won't you please come to America? He said, no, beloved, there's no permission for that. I can't come to America, but keep with the teachings. And then, I didn't feel my situation was getting any better, even though I loved the teachings. And he kept saying, be patient, trust Allah, be patient, trust Allah. And I think I was somehow deep in my heart looking that some miracle was going to happen, until I finally realized, he was giving me the secret that I had to be patient and trust Allah and to go with the teachings. And so I kept, for at least 2 years, I kept saying, Sidi, please, won't you come here? Won't you come here? And I was having difficulty finding the time. I wanted to go back and see him again. But he said, no, let's just stay with the teachings, trust Allah. And so I remember it really clearly. I was sitting at my desk one day, and I said, Sidi, really, really, there's a group over here, with Noura and Tariq, and they would all love to see you. And Amina Al-Jamal had been teaching some people up in California where Mahdi and Rida, his sons, live. And so, I knew that we could get an audience for him because they were so phenomenal, these teachings. And so this one time I said, Sidi, please, won't you reconsider? We could set up some meetings in different places. You could get some students. And Sidi was at that time what you call a hidden teacher. He hadn't really exposed himself. There were some people who knew him. I know that Abdulhaq Godless, I think, had been over there. The Durkees had been over there. The Lokes, Amina Al-Jamal. So there were some people from the States that knew him and had been over there. But he just kept saying, no, no. And then this one time, instead of saying no, he said, Inshallah. And I really, it was like, why, he didn't say no? He said, Inshallah. And believe me, I don't think for a moment that I had any influence on bringing Sidi over. I know that he was listening to the voices of Allah. It was not my voice. I can't take credit for anything like that. And in fact, there's a story I like to, I feel it was a huge blessing in my life to have that Sidi trusted me so much and allowed me to have so much proximity with him. And one time I heard a story of a Sufi teacher that had an assistant that worked with him, and the assistant left the dunya, and so the teacher sent out words to his tariqa saying, I'd like somebody else to come and help me. And so like many of the students came to apply for, helping the master, and finding, one guy got chosen. And they were having lunch in the Zawiya, and he was sitting at the table saying, you know, I'm really so proud I got chosen for this. Been up, I did all the prayers. I've been keeping up doing all night vigils. I've studied all the teachings, and I'm so proud that I'm so deserving of this. And the teacher was standing behind him and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Beloved, I didn't choose you because you were the most deserving. I chose you because you were most in need of the teachings." And I think that I was desperately in need of the teachings. And I think that most of the people that I know that came to Sidi were as hungry and desperate for the truth as I was. And this is, Tony Robbins always says you either run towards pleasure or run from pain. And my experience has been that Sidi attracted a lot of people that were trying to run from pain. It's not necessarily they were looking for pleasure, they were looking for the truth of their being. They were looking for, what was causing them all this pain. And I think that one of the things I learned from Sidi is that our pain comes a lot from blocked love. We think that we're in pain from what we're not getting. I think that I was thinking that, if the mother of my 4 kids would come back, and if I could get love through that face again, that this would solve my problems and I'd be happy. But what had happened is that my heart had shut down and I wasn't loving unconditionally anymore. And Sidi was so gently guiding me towards this, pointing out, I had so much to be grateful for. I had so many things that I could, be thankful for. And that if I trusted Allah, that, and I started to really allow myself to feel the presence of Allah and love Allah, that things would get better for me. And he said, you don't need the love through any particular face. You just need your connection with Allah, and you need your heart loving, and you'll be fine. And so one night I was sitting in my home, and I went into, my 2 little kids were sleeping, and I went in to watch them sleep, and I just sat by their bed, and just the love in my heart for these 2 little beings just started to really flow. And something in that moment unlocked something for me. It was like I started walking around the house and realized what a great house I had. I started, looking at all the different gifts that I had gotten through the face of Allah that I was just kind of ignoring. And I was thinking, I've been so blessed. I've been given so much. And I think for each of us who have had the opportunity to meet a human being that carried Allah the way Sidi did, this is one of the greatest gifts that we can have in life. I know that one Ramadan, when I was really, really struggling, and I felt that I've been in the path for years, and I felt that I hadn't grown, that everything was static, that I wasn't opening more, that I wasn't going to the next stage. And so I started to read the Wazifa in English and memorize it actually in English. And through that, I fell in love with the Prophet ﷺ. And again, it was my heart opening and starting to love that allowed me to go to what I felt was another stage of appreciation. And Sidi, when he first came over, he used to go up to Marin, where Mahdi and Rida and Amina were, and then he would come down to Santa Fe to the Lokes house. And one day we were sitting in the Lokes house, and this lady came up to Sidi that I knew really well, and she was talking. She said, Sidi, I give my husband so much love. I do everything for him. And yet I don't feel that he really appreciates me. I don't feel that I'm getting as much love back from him as I give. And Sidi looked at her and he said, "Beloved, you're giving your husband what you think he needs, but you're not giving him what he wants." And I remember thinking, I knew this couple really well, and Sidi had literally seen this lady 5 minutes. And when she got up to leave, I said, you know, Sidi, that was amazing. How do you know that? How did you, you know, he said, Allah shows me. I said, I know he shows you, Sidi, but how does he show you? I wanted to learn how to do this. And he said, he just shows me. I said, but what, in pictures? Is it words? It is. And he said, no, Allah just shows me. I realized that he wasn't going to tell me. But so I looked at him and I wanted to know, you know, what nafs he saw in me. And I said, well, Sidi, when you look at me, what do you see? And I was sincerely wanting to know, like, what are the faults that I need to clean? What are the things that I need to fix within myself? And he just looked at me and this twinkle in his eye and he said, I see beauty. And this was like this, probably one of the biggest healing moments in my life. I just couldn't believe, because I looked up to him so much, and he really was like the total father and mother image. He was everything to me at that particular point. And I think that this is how Sidi healed people. He reflected back to them something of their own divinity. Just try to remember within yourself some of the experiences that you had with him. And you can have them again, because to me this last week, as I've kind of delved into it, it really keeps coming back to me, the amazing experiences and the amazing gifts that Sidi brought to all of us. And even though his body is not with us, those gifts are always with us. And I was talking actually with Wadud Laird the other night, and with my beloved Hassan, you know, I would have thought by now that my grieving would more or less be complete. And somehow I'm beginning to feel that it's almost starting now. I just, like, it was such a shock to me that maybe I shut out of it a lot. I mean, he was such a big part of my life. He'd come to my house every day for months and months and months. And I spent so much time with him, traveling and sleeping with him. And, you know, it's like, really made me miss him. I love him so much. Sorry. But anyway, it's like, I'm grateful to Abdullah and to all of you to actually have brought up this subject so that I could actually look it up and deal with it and start to think about it and really come to more terms with it. And I talk a lot with the boys, and I feel his presence. I mean, it's almost like sometimes I'm at my desk and I hear his voice and I turn around and almost expect to see him. But I hope you all keep alive those feelings too, because beyond the sadness and the pain, I've just discovered so many gifts in just like rereading the teachings and going over some of these moments. And, you know, I realized too that I've been living kind of a disconnected life, even though I was very successful. I loved what I did in photography, and I was very blessed with, you know, making good money and blessed with 4 amazing children. I didn't feel that I was making that big a difference with my life. And in fact, it reminds me of a story. One time I lost my brother when he was 22. He died in an accident. And I went to India to kind of look for some answers, you know, to how did these things happen? And I was on a pilgrimage to go meet a certain saint there, and we were in an English refugee village called Dehradun in the northern part of India. And we went in a restaurant, and it was fairly sophisticated, and the restaurant actually had a covered outhouse, which in those parts of rural India were very unusual. And when I went into the outhouse, it was just a hole dug in the ground, but instead of leaves, they actually had some newspapers and magazines that you could crumple up and use for tissue. So I reached over and I tore out a couple of pages of a magazine. I started to crumple them up, and something made me look at those pictures. And I opened up, and it was a photograph I'd taken for Elle magazine. And here, I remember it was a difficult picture. I had to fight to get it in the magazine, to get my choice in the magazine. And, here it was, a piece of toilet paper. And I think that the opportunity that I had to work with Sidi and spread these teachings and all the videos that I had the opportunity to make with him, all the visits to Jerusalem. And it was such a gift to be able to do something that had purpose and meaning and that made a difference in other people's lives. So, Abdullah and all of you on here, and, Ibrahim Jaffe and the Lairds and Salima and Salih. I mean, there's so many people that have worked so tirelessly that have been like the arms and the legs to keep this message alive. And I know it's a challenge. I know that we're all kind of still looking to how we can, make us all one heart, one body, one soul, and make this work. And it's difficult. It's a challenge, but it also reminds me, that Sidi always told me that this path is the fastest path that he knows to Allah, but it's also one of the hardest. And he said, it's not about the quantity of people, it's about the quality of the people that you bring to the path. And actually, the last time I saw Abdullah, I think I told this story. He used to come, when he came to Santa Fe, he always came about a week or two after Amaji, the Indian lady who would come. And Amaji would have this huge tent with 1,000 people. I mean, for the whole week, just huge groups of people would come. And she didn't really do teachings that I was present for, but you would stand in line and get a hug. And then when Sidi was there, I was lucky if I could get 15 to 20 people to come and be in the room. And so anyway, one day it was about 20 to 10 and people were starting to come. And he said, Salih, he came and he said, Salih, I need to go get a walking stick. And I said, okay, well, we'll go right after the teaching. He said, no, we need to go now. He was always the son of his moment. And I said, but Sidi, the people are, they're just arriving. And he says, no, we really should go. This is important. And I had no way to say no to the guy. So we got it. I had this 65 Impala with the top down, and we started driving. There was Sidi in his jalaba and his kufi. It was an amazing vision for the people of New Mexico. But so I started to go to these different shops looking for a walking stick. And I was getting super nervous. I didn't have a cell phone at the time. I couldn't call home, explain what was going on, and it got to be 10:15 and 10:30 and 11:15. I was feeling really uncomfortable with all this. And finally I said, Sidi, I don't know what to tell you. Can't we go home and do the teaching and then come back for the stick? And he said, Salih, it's not a stick I'm looking for, it's a person. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, like a face came into my head. I thought, I think I know who this is. And this is a guy who had a shop with a lot of things from Afghanistan and everything else. And I called the shop and I asked if he was there, and they said, no, he's at home in Arroyo Hondo. So I called him out in Arroyo Hondo, which was near, he was in Seton Village, I guess, or near where I lived in Arroyo Hondo. And he said, sure, come on over. I have some sticks here. I'll show them to you. So we walk into this guy's house and we sit down, and Sidi starts telling this guy, like looking straight at him and saying, I came here to tell you that you're not being honest with the people. You need to be more straight. You need to go Sirat al-Mustaqim. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I brought this guy to Sidi to this guy's house, and all of a sudden he's like putting him on the carpet. And so anyway, he gave him this teaching, and then he says, okay, Salih, let's go. And he didn't even ask to see a stick. And off we drove. And then on the way home, I said, Sidi, what was all that about? Why couldn't we have done that this afternoon? He said, because this was his time. This was his time for the message. And this is what Allah wanted from me today, to give that message to that person. And then many times over the years, I would talk to Sidi and say, Sidi, if we could, sometimes soften the message a little bit, I think we could get, lots and lots more people to come and listen to you. And then once you've got them in the net, he says, no, he says, I'm not interested in that. Like I want people that are going to come in and they're serious. They're going to stay with this path. They're not just going to come in and have a taste and leave. He said, it's not about having a lot of people, because I told him the story of Amish. He says, I'm not interested in having just a lot of people. I'm interested in people who love Allah, who want to know Allah, and who want to stay with Allah. So for all of you who, even after Sidi's left us in the body, are still here, I'm hoping that this is showing you that Sidi's intention was that you should stay a long time, and that, it wasn't him that was important, it was the message he carried. And so for all of you who are involved in sharing this message and promoting this message, I'm hoping that you're finding, even if it's just one person or one of your children, or don't judge yourself by how many people you bring to the path. Judge yourself, if you want to judge yourself, by how far you walk the path, how much you get involved in the path, how much it's affected your life, how much it's changed your life, because who you are and how you assimilate these teachings and put them into practice in your daily life, this is what is going to give you all the value. And the experiences that will eventually enrich everybody that comes in contact with you, whether they come on the path or not. And I think it's pretty obvious in these times, with all the dissension and the sadness and the lack of connection with Allah that we experience, and how the world sees the beauty of Islam through such perverted lenses and through the opinions of others who don't have any understanding of the magic of Islam, the true Islam that Sidi carried. It's a very difficult time, but difficult times never faze Sidi. As many of you know, he had a tough time over in the Holy Land. He spent time, being arrested and going to jail. And he says, "Oh, that's okay. It was like a retreat for me." But it was still, Sidi knew everybody, it seemed, in the Holy Land, at least in and around Jerusalem where he lived. And every day he had a just relentless barrage of people with pain and poverty coming to him for help. And he was just tireless in his efforts to help everybody and anybody he could, even in some way, with sweet words, or, he always had something in his desk. He had, just piles of change that he would give people. And he supported so many families. Wow. I mean, I just, some of the times when I'd be over there for a month or so, and he would go around, and even in this country, there was just so many people that he helped. And I wish he'd had more time to stay with us, because it's hard now to face these people and know there's all that pain and poverty out there, and it's just not having enough resources to help them. I know this is what would please Sidi the most, because this is what he loved the most, was helping the poor. And I think in many ways he considered all of us, his students over here, as being poor in relation to, all we had to learn still. And when I was in Jerusalem and he would go and speak at Al-Aqsa, he'd speak to sometimes 250,000 people. And he would be on the television, so it might even be 1 million. And for 6 months out of every year, for over 20 years, he came here and just spend his time with a few hundred of us. And it had always been my dream that we would have these large crowds. But in the end, I really did come to terms with that, the amount of sincerity and devotion in the few hundred that were before him were more powerful than 1,000 people that weren't really focused on doing the work that Sidi wanted us all to do. He said that the light of Allah is so strong, only really the prophets and the great teachers could contain this light. And that's why the disciplines he taught, the vigils, the all-night retreats, the prayers, the practicing of the zikrs, all of these were to build a container so that we could contain this light and it wouldn't just disappear. It's kind of like if you have one of those old gardening buckets, with it had the big round thing with lots and lots of holes in it. But if you had a hole in the bottom of the can and you didn't see it, the can would be empty of all the water in the morning. And that's kind of like we are. If we don't seal some of these little holes of our being, the knowledge and the light of his teachings will eventually just seep out of us. And the practices and the disciplines allow us to build a stronger container where we can have a deeper understanding of who Sidi really was and what his teachings were really about. And truthfully, I'll tell you, even in the last months, I would look at Sidi sometime and I'd see 5 different faces staring back at me. It was I know I could only know just a small portion of him. There was so much depth and so much knowledge and so much deep love, and his faith is, after even at the end when he, his brain was going through all these different things, he just kept saying, everything's okay, just trust Allah, Salah, just trust Allah. And that was all he relied on. It was just, and I remember the neurologist saying that in all her years of practice, she has never seen anybody with as many mini shocks in their brain as Sidi had. She said, I don't even understand how he can function. It's just, it's beyond science. And it was his faith. It was his connection with Allah. And at the end, seeing him, he was born in Tulkarm in a field. His mom gave birth to him in a field and brought him home on a donkey. And then, at the end here, he was tied to all these machines and everything. But it wasn't the machines, it was his faith. It was his power of his being. It was just something that I hope you'll all realize how blessed you were to have been exposed to him and to be exposed to his teachings, and having been exposed to so many people who had their lives transformed and changed by his teachings. There's so many just unbelievable people that have come together as a community. And if you're reading in the Music of the Soul, he'll tell you your true family is not always your blood family. Your true family are the people that love Allah like you love Allah. And what Sidi taught me is there's kind of 2 kinds of people in the world. That it's like the people that really, really, really love Allah and those that don't. And it's like when Allah says, am I not your Lord? And it's the people who answer yes. It's the strength of their yes that will determine how far they go. And I just never met anybody whose yes was as powerful as Sidi. It was and I'd spent a lot of time, especially when I was in India, meeting a lot of teachers and gurus, and I'd always sought out different masters. But for me, not to diminish anybody else, Sidi had an amazing power. And what I'd like to do is share a story with you that's deeply personal for me, but that is a real example of how Sidi could see things with the eye of Allah. So even after he'd come here a few times and everything, one time I was in Santa Fe and I was in the middle of a photo shoot, and it was for a very high-end commercial client. We had like a very expensive photo crew, models at $5,000 and $10,000 a day and anything. So I just started this shoot when my mom called me up from the East Coast and told me, she said, your dad has gone in the hospital and I'm not sure he's going to make it out. I think it's important that you come here. And I thought, well, Mom, I'm just starting this shoot. I don't think I could possibly get there before a week. And she said, well, I'm not sure he's going to last a week. And astaghfirullah, my mom sometimes would exaggerate things to get us to do the things that she wanted. But anyway, I called Sidi in Jerusalem and I said, Sidi, my mom just called and said that my dad was in the hospital and that I should come there, but I'm involved in this business here. And I really feel that I shouldn't leave. I don't know that, I don't know what to do. And he says, on the phone, he said, beloved, if you can go, that would be good. And I said, well, Sidi, maybe I could go on Saturday. It was like a Tuesday. And he said, no, I think you should go sooner than that. And I said, well, what do you mean, like Friday or something? And he says, no, sooner than that. And I said, well, how am I going to do that, Sidi? He said, and he said, trust Allah. And I said, well, when should I go? And he said, as soon as you can go. And I said, what, you mean like tomorrow? He said, beloved, if you can go today, this is good. And I'm telling you, my heart just was like, I thought, oh my gosh, this is bad news, because this means that my dad is really at the end. And so anyway, so I hung up the phone and I called up my client, who I'd been working with a number of times and was also a fairly close friend. And I explained the situation. He said, don't have a second thought about it. I'll speak to the girls. We'll work everything out. Don't worry about it. And I said, listen, I'm happy to give up my fee to pay the models, but I really think I should go. And he said, go, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And so it was like, I think it was like 8:30 in the morning already in Santa Fe. And the last flight was like at 10:20 or something from Albuquerque, which was an hour away. And I rushed to the house and I grabbed some stuff and madly drove to the airport. And literally they had closed the door of the airplane when I got there. And they opened it up and let me on when I told them it was a life and death situation. So I got to New Jersey that night, and my sister picked me up and brought me to the hospital. And when I got in, my dad was sitting up, and he didn't look that well. I could definitely see that. And so it was pretty late. So my mom and I left after about a half hour to an hour and go back to go to sleep, and then come back in the morning. And when we went back in the morning at 7:30, my dad was sitting up in bed and having breakfast, and he looked really good. And so I talked to him for about 20 minutes. And then I went out into the hallway where there was a payphone, and I called Sidi in Jerusalem and said, Sidi, I'm here with my dad, and I came back this morning and he's looking really well. And he said, yes, this is the mercy of your visit. And I said, well, I think, should I go back to Santa Fe because these people are waiting? And he said, beloved, wait one more day. And I thought, okay. And so then that day, I was sitting with my dad and we were talking, and he was my adopted dad, and I was a very rebellious and troublesome kid and caused him lots of grief. And he had never really expressed himself emotionally to me very much, and nor me to him, sadly to say. And one time I had heard a song by, I think it was Mike and the Mechanics, about In the Living Years. If you've never heard this song, I suggest you look it up on YouTube, In the Living Years. And it talks about how this person wished he had said things to his dad in his living years. So I'd written a letter to my dad and told him I'd never really expressed how much I appreciated all he'd done for me and everything. So I'd kind of cleared the air a little bit. And then when my younger brother passed, and I came and I spent a lot of time with him, talking to him about some more spiritual things. At one point he said to me, I may have lost one son, but I feel like I've gained another. And that was really just because of what I could share with him from Sidi's teachings. But anyway, as we sat in his room that morning, for the first time that I can ever remember in my life, he actually told me he loved me. And then that afternoon, he was gone. And somehow, Sidi knew all this, all the way from Jerusalem, never having met my dad. And this is just like the tiniest piece of story, because over the 2 decades that I was with him, the things that he saw about me, about my kids, about all of you, about what was going on, he saw things that there was just no human way to see. It was only through the eyes of Allah that he could see all these things. And often when I'd ask him why he didn't tell us more, he said, because people just can't contain the real truth yet. They're just not ready. And he said the teachings will prepare people for that, but he said there's just no permission from Allah to say and share certain things until the people are ready to hear them. And so he was I think he was very careful in many ways of how much of himself he really wanted to show to people, because I guess it was Allah's wisdom behind it all. He always used to tell me, I never focus on what my needs are. I always focus on what Allah's needs are. And what does Allah need from me? And I ask myself this a lot, is there more that I could be doing here? Is there more that I could be sharing here? And I know there always is. And I know that so many of you feel this same thing. There's so much love that you have for who Sidi is and who he was and everything that he carried and for his teachings. And I think that the solution is to share it one step at a time, like Sidi would say, one person at a time. And not just expose somebody to what these teachings are, but to really take them deep into the teaching and not to leave them until they really know how to do the teaching, how to use the teachings, how to do the prayers. I remember I never really had anybody showing me all that. And one day, Nura Lokes came over to my house and she asked me to lead the prayer. And I think I did it all wrong, because she said, did Sidi teach you how to do that? I said, well, not really. I said, it's just, what I've learned on my own. So I made so many mistakes, astaghfirullah al-azim. But
So Salih,
yeah.
we're coming up at the top of the hour.
Really? Holy moly.
Tell the end of the walking stick story. So you guys had left that fellow's house and you were driving back and you went back to the house where everybody had gathered for the class.
Well, there were hardly any people left anymore. And, but Sidi somehow said, the ones that are supposed to be here will come back. And they did, It was rough too. I mean, wow, I thought I'd been talking about 20 minutes. I apologize. It's half for a lot.
No, it was great. It's been great, Salih.
What I'd like to do is I actually made some notes here of some things that Sidi would say, some du'as that Amani translated, and I'd just like to share some of those with you. One thing that might be useful for you, this is, I had a friend one time who was in Hollywood, and he had just this amazing way of always dealing with problems and coming out on top. And I said, Jim, how do you do that? And he says, I just think, what would Fred Astaire have done in this situation? And that's what I do. And I thought it was such an amazing thing. And so now what I often do when I meet a thing in my life, I think, well, what would Sidi do? What would he say? And I always get the answer. And, like you'll find it, you just can open up one of the books to a blank, just to a haphazard page, and you'll find out. So for all of you, it's something I'd suggest doing. If you ever feel lost and confused, just think, well, what would Sidi tell me to do in this situation? And I think you'll always find the answer. But anyway, let me take this and read this. So he would do this in Arabic, but I'm going to do it in English. He would say, send your peace and blessings on all humanity without separation. Give people patience in every difficulty with your encompassing mercy. Relieve hardships of all. Grant them solutions for every problem. Safety from every fear. Forgiveness and protection from every calamity and pain. And he would do this dua over and over and over at the end of almost every salah. So I put together a little prayer that I'd like you all to join me with. Please, Allah, preserve and guard our beloved guide and his family and followers. And please, Allah, keep him always in the safety and sanctity of your shade. Keep and preserve his secret and guide us in how and what we can do that would please him and benefit you. Thank you, Allah, for the great and deep blessing of having Sidi in our lives as our guide. Our hearts are overflowing in gratitude. May we always move towards more and more proximity as we learn to live from and apply his teachings, which are your teachings, Allah. And may we always keep our hearts open and flowing with the love that Sidi shared with us. This is all from you, Allah, and may we return it to you, magnified and with eternal gratitude. Ameen.
Ameen.
So, love side, sorry if I just carried on, the time just flew by in an
instant. I know. The stories were wonderful, Salih, and your insights were wonderful. And I know that I'm speaking for everybody in our community, in our Tariqah. And I want to express our undying gratitude and thankfulness to you for everything that you've done for us, for your friendship with Sidi, for making it possible for him to be with us for many, many years. And we would not be who we are without you. And we love you, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
No, I really appreciate that. It was not, I think that it would have happened anyway. If it wasn't me, it would have been somebody else. Sidi had ways of bringing, every time he needed something, whatever he needed, the solution would show up. And I can tell you, I love him to death, but he was he was like, he could push my button more than my own mom.
Well, you were his friend forever, and you're our friend too. So
I am. I love you all, and I love the opportunity that, without all of you, I wouldn't have had the opportunity. So, and, bless you, Abdullah, for carrying on this and keeping the teachings alive. And I hope that all of you are forever blessed for every moment that you've ever had to spend with this extraordinary, illuminated, human being who just, I hope that that you all realize too that the Jerusalem kindergarten has now become like a zawiya, and that beloveds can actually go over there. And this Ramadan, we plan to feed over 100 kids or 100 people a day, to have over 30,000 boxes of food and clothing and toys. And you can actually go over. I know that Ibrahim Jaffe went with his son, and Mars Ritter with Menage. A lot of beloveds have been over there, and actually even during Ramadan, and had a chance to actually participate and help. And it takes a lot of people to do what Sidi did in the United States. I know that Sidi was the person around and the driving energy behind everything, but God bless, all the people, Salih Cotton and Salima and you, Abdullah, and Zara in Boston. And I mean, I don't want to forget anybody, but there are just so many people that have worked so hard to keep Sidi's teachings and to keep them going and to keep the university going. And may Allah reward you richly. And don't count your blessings by the number of people. Count the blessings by how much love you have in your heart and how Sidi helped you open your heart to know Allah. Because I started the Ramadan story. I forgot to tell you that, the greatest gift we have in life, I believe, is himma to know Allah. It's like, this is what, this desire that you have that attracted you to these teachings. And, Sidi would say, if Allah wasn't calling you now, you wouldn't be here. Think about what that great gift is, and think about, one person at a time. There are people out there seeking to know Sidi, and you have Sidi in you, even if you just met him once, or even if you've just done the teachings, and you can illuminate and change not only your own life, but somebody else's life if you trust in these teachings and keep everything going. So thank you again for the opportunity to be with you. I have a deep love for everybody that Sidi brought into my life, and I know the sincerity that you all have to know Allah and the gifts you have, and how much you've given of yourself to promote these teachings, and may you be forever blessed. Ameen.